Hey there, Foster Fierce Nation, and welcome back to Interview with a Foster Kid. I'm your host, Amira Therese. Today, I am so excited to introduce someone who's had a profound impact on my life. Not only was she my former foster mother, but she's also a passionate nurse and a dedicated mom. While having to navigate the challenges of single motherhood after experiencing great loss, she opened her heart to two foster children who needed her, my sister and I. Kathleen is also the author of Voices of the ER. It is a behind-the-scenes look at some of the most heart and gut-wrenching emergency moments and some of the intense realities she faces every day in and outside of the emergency room. So, Kathleen, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. Why don't you get things kicked off, introduce yourself, and share a bit about your journey?
Well, I really think that's what mothers do. Thank you, by the way, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. I'm Kathleen Kelly. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also a sexual assault nurse examiner, and I'm also the coordinator for Apache County and Gila County for the Child Fatality Review for the Health Department. So I review every child death, and I go into the counselors, the Child Protective Services. I look into their internet, and that tells you where they've been, their whole stories. I talk to school counselors I honor each child death. And then I bring all these first responders. I've been an ER nurse forever. And sometimes we wonder where are the parents, where are the schools, the police wonder where the medical professionals. So I bring all these first responders together, and we talk about this child, and we look into it and decide whether it was preventable and what we can do to prevent further deaths of children, and let the community know what they can do, like sudden infant death syndrome. And we can do grants, and I do a lot of educating of parents and families of how they prevent problems. We got drug problems, we have homeless problems for children, and foster care programs are really suffering because it's a very difficult time for children right now. But then, the health department they do like laws like fences around pools and child seats, and we do a lot of good things, right?
And you're still going strong. I mean, you said it right when you said passion.
Yeah. Well, I come from, my darling, you're my darling niece, and I'm so proud of you. But I come from a family of 9 kids in our family, and your mom was one of them. And I tell you what, my dad and my mom, the dinner table could have 1 or 2 extra kids, and the people would stay. If you need a mom, I learned from our mother, my mom, that's what moms do, And then when I got married, and I had a difficult time because domestic violence at that time was, well, you'd call the police, and then they put their arm around your husband and walk him away. And so you know how women are, and then you get more beat, for calling. And let me just tell you what started me with my sexual assault nurse examining program. I was an ER nurse, and we're up in the mountains here in Mesa Mountains, the Arizona mountains, and that's country medicine, and everybody kind of takes care of each other. But I had a 2-year-old come in that was sexually assaulted by her father, and we didn't have the legal way of, and you can't. A 2-year-old does not have the language to talk about what happened. And we did a physical exam and all that, but we didn't have the way to do it legally so that it'll stand up in court. Wow. And so I tried to get Child Protective Services to get this child away so we could get her safe until the law could take over. Well, they couldn't do anything. So I stormed into my supervisor's office and said, we got to do something about this. I'd seen too many kids that we have not done the job of protecting them. And domestic violence, with my own case, I mean, I had to leave the state to be safe and bring my kids with me. And it's very frustrating. And so my supervisor said, yeah, you certainly ought to do something about that. You know?
Yeah, somebody
So I
should.
decided, okay, yeah, someone should do that. Someone should take care of business here. And so it got my Irish up. So I said, okay, watch this. You get my Irish up and you better watch out. That's like my kids, if I have that face on me, you better think about me.
When you had that face on you, I'd go to the barn.
Yeah, the barn. Yeah, my daughter. That's a good spot for me too. I used to go there just to get away from everything. I used to
Yeah.
love to shovel the shit from the horses. I tell you what, I love to do that. That's something, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was doing it in my own life, shoveling it anyway. There's a way to look at that. But I did some research, and we didn't have Google then, so I looked through the nurse. I did some articles for emergency nursing, and I found this lady that taught sexual assault nursing examining, what you do legally, how you examine patients, how you teach people to document in a way that's effective and how to be an expert witness. And she was wonderful. So I said, well, yeah, we need that here up in the mountains. And she said, yeah, well, I'd be glad to come. It'll be $1,000 per student. So I didn't have the money in my bank. And they said, well, if you can figure out a way to make that possible, if you can figure out a way to get that money, then we'll do it up here in the mountain. We'll work it. So I called every hospital in Arizona and got them to send an ER nurse. And from that moment on, we started a program. And that
A
training
movement.
session was incredible. And yeah, and now they have special clinics, but every community now has a sexual assault nurse examiner, and that helps with domestic violence. And they can do the examination, they can do the counseling, and they can make sure that they get them safe and give them ways of staying safe. And it's been exciting to watch that evolve.
And it's again another testament to how to not ignore our past and the things that happened. Don't delete it. Don't get over it. We need to connect who we are now, our past pains, with our future's purpose. I mean, it changed everything when I started thinking that way. When I started giving purpose to all of the things that I went through, I started really just loving myself as a child and accepting every experience as an exciting one, even the ones that, took me 20 years to process. It gave me this sense of purpose, which made my past so much more meaningful. It wasn't something I wanted to delete anymore. It wasn't something I wanted to lie about or create a, new story. Hi, my name is Amira Therese. I'm from Canada. Both of my parents died and left me rich. I think that was one of my many stories. I don't know. I just
you
know
too?
that I know that for a very long time, I didn't tell the story of my life because I was so ashamed of it. And I can't find any reason to be ashamed of something that feels this purposeful to me now. And so I'm so grateful to hear your testament, what you said, and just hearing how excited you get about it. It's amazing. It's so exciting. But back to that, you were extending yourself in every direction. Single mother, working full time as a nurse, starting movements and fostering your nieces. Tell us more about that. That takes extraordinary strength.
Well, let me just say something about what you brought up. Is such an important thing, that shame. Children, they have a way of turning whatever happens in their life into their own fault. Now, I can tell you, when my 17-year-old son was killed by a drunk driver, somehow my little daughter, she said, they all figured out, did I say something wrong? Did my son, children have a way of turning it around. So they did something wrong. When I got a divorce, maybe if we were better kids, mommy and daddy would have stayed together. Maybe if we had not been better students, maybe if I didn't talk back or whatever. And in your case, my darling, you had been through so many things with your parents about how it was an unstable thing. You were left with different people, and you went from person to person to person, and family member to family member, and you had so many abandonment issues. And you became kind of the mother of your little sister. You had to take care of her. And so whatever happened to her, you got to have the guilt about that too, because you weren't taking care of her and you were just a child. And what complicates it, when you have foster programs, and I work with the Child Protective Services a lot, and God bless them. It's a rough job, but it's also difficult. But when you are they try to keep them with the family, and that is the good
Right.
news and the news, because you want to have family. But with myself, with my sister, and I think a lot of foster parents, when they are a family member taking over, my sister was very angry that I split up her family. I took her kids away from her. And it's very hard for parents that are also going through a hard time with drugs or alcohol or marriage issues or their own things, to be able to allow their family members to know what their private life is like. Because, we all try to put
Yeah.
out that best show, like you're rich and you're from Canada or rich or whatever. We all try to
Yeah.
put out that face. But
Right.
family members, we know stuff about each other. So it's
Yeah.
really, it can be very difficult. And with, when you have also 8 brothers and sisters, what happens in a divorce situation too, kids will talk about set one parent against the other, so that
Always. Yes.
so you can get more privileges on this side. Well, mom said I could do that, and dad's doing this, so I need to
Yep.
live with my dad. Or my mom won't, discipline me as much, so I want to live with my mom or whatever. So what happened was all 8 brothers and sisters get an earful from my sister, and also from both of you who didn't want to be away from your family because your mom also had other siblings that weren't taken away from her. So that must have been traumatic for you to know your mom had other kids that could stay with her. And why couldn't you be with her?
I'll comment on that because that was one of the things I couldn't understand. And to be honest,
Yeah.
and I'm not floating my own boat here, but you know that I was pretty intelligent for my age and I took things in. I paid attention to every meeting,
Yeah.
every court hearing. So my point is I really battled with being completely aware of all of the reasons that I'm today aware of my mental illnesses, but it's like when you're so astute, when you're so self-aware, but you can't even seek therapy. You can't, because you don't trust it. You know what they're going to say.
You were way ahead of the therapist. You had that therapy language down. You could have out-therapized anybody. I think I made that word up just for you.
I think I've used the word therapize. I liked the word therapize for a long time.
Okay.
But to that, so one of the things I would focus on in therapy, and none of them could help me because again, I was just already being analytical about what their issues probably were. The one thing I wanted to talk about in therapy was what is so wrong with my mother that I can't live with her because she has other children. So clearly she's a home that is acceptable for children. Why not me? And that also reinforced that it was me and that it was my sister.
It would have to. And children are really good at that, taking it somehow their own fault. And that shame, that to me is a big issue for all foster kids, most kids that go through anything. You grow up thinking of all the things you did wrong. And the fact that you have nothing, you didn't choose those things. You had nothing to be ashamed of. But that's easy to say and very hard to come to in your psyche. Sometimes when you end up having children of your own, and this is a lot of things for sexual abuse children too, when they grow up, they can, because your brain will let you remember sometimes things as you're ready and feel safe to remember these trauma.
I have to tell you that I get memories now that scare me, and I have to see, why didn't I remember that before? Is this reality? Am I making this memory up, or did it really happen that way? And it's very confusing.
Well, because you were overwhelmed. The brain is so protective, and the brain protects children too, so they can go on and survive. But sometimes when you have a child that is the same age of what happened to you, you will get these memories back. But also the healing part of that is you go, I could never do that to my child. That child would never have anything to feel ashamed of if that happened to her. So then you could start talking to yourself saying that I had nothing to be ashamed of. You have no power and control. That is one of the most healing things to happen, is if you have help and you have love, care, and someone who listens that you can trust around those times when these memories come up. And when you allow that shame to start surfacing, you can say, okay, now I'm no longer that child, but you can love that child and talk to that little Amy and go, listen, Amy, I'm so glad you survived. I remember I could get emotional too I remember the rage inside you. And I remember feeling it for you too, thinking I was enraged at what had happened to you. And of course, you don't tell your sister how pissed you are at her because some of the things or choices she made, because, everyone does what they can. The thing is, you had such rage and such good reasons for rage. And what children do is they take it out in different ways to the people that are their caregivers at the time, especially if they're not supposed to be their caregivers. Your parents are supposed to do that, And when they
Absolutely.
can't do that, the foster parent takes on all of that. And so I remember you getting so angry and so screaming and yelling and starting to get violent. And I like to say, it's a good thing you were portable. You were a tiny little thing. I could
I know,
pick
I
you
was
up and
about
turn you
60
around.
pounds, 60 pounds my entire life. So.
And I would just hold you and just whisper in your ear, I'm going to love you through this. I'm going to love you through this. And I prayed then that someday you'd know that.
You
Because
know
you didn't
what?
know it
You
then,
did.
but
You
yeah.
did love me. I've had a couple of people in my life that have really given me the fundamental building blocks that necessary to be a mother, and which was so important. Your patience. I remember those floor hugs where you just had to like calm me down. But I
Yeah.
will say that without the building blocks, and I'll also add on
Oh,
that
yeah.
most of the time, children are going to not just take out their rage on who is in charge of them, who isn't naturally supposed to be, but also, and to your credit, they usually rage the most in the situations where they feel the safest, or where they feel like they won't be thrown away, or where they can rage.
Exactly. Yeah, if someone's going to, you know that I'd love you anyway. That's why a lot of parents,
Yes.
you'd say to your parents things that you wouldn't say to anybody else. My kids said stuff to me that, because we will love you anyway. And the fact you trusted
Yes.
me to just let that go and know that I would be there on the other side of it, that's a privilege that I felt. I felt privileged to have that time in your life. And I prayed that time, that whatever I could give you, you could take with you, and it could build on one of those building blocks to get you through your life. I'm so proud of you today. I just burst just having this conversation, because you can take that gift that'll keep giving to other families. And foster parents have such a struggle dealing with all
Yeah.
of the issues, because one of the things that I will say to all other foster parents and and all parents, I guess, love is not enough. It's not just about love. You can love all you want, all of our kids, and you love your kids as you
Yeah.
love yours, but that's not enough. You have to go through different things. For each child, it's different. And you have to be able to, like I was saying, and when we were talking about it before, when there's a divorce, we tend to give our kids overcompensate and not discipline and not just let them get away with stuff. But
Yes.
you're not giving them a dip. You're making it easier on yourself by saying, okay, I'll just give in to it, because you're also going through trauma. And I know when my
Yes.
son died, I was dealing with kids who had seen their father do some abusive, violent things to me. And then soon after that, my son died, the big brother. He was the oldest. And
Yeah.
it was a very traumatic time for them. And I had to be very strong saying, I mean, I remember Kenny was in high school saying, why should I bother go to school? Why should I do that? Why, and there was the things where there's
Yeah.
tempting to drink and drug and get kids into trouble. And Erin, my other daughter, she just turned off. And so I had to be the one to
Yeah.
be structured, because children that go through trauma, all foster parents and regular parents, I'm going to tell you this, if children that go through trauma need that structure. You can't say, oh gosh, the poor things had all this stuff, so I'm going to kind of No, and kids are real good at manipulating that, getting things out.
Oh, come on. Not me.
Not you, Amy. Not you. All the other kids in my family. But you were very innocent. But the
Oh my
thing
God.
is that Well, you probably know with your own kids, you have to give them structure. You have to be strong. And saying no is sometimes the biggest gift you can give to them. It's harder on you because it's easier just to because that's not giving them, you're not
Yeah.
giving them responsible choices and how to make those. And that was
And the structure
one of the challenges.
And the structure of, like you said, those building blocks, it's so important. I have a story
Yeah.
in your barn. I was so embarrassed, okay? Because when you're in foster care, you also, I mean, you have all the syndromes, right? And then you're always kind of a little ashamed of yourself,
Oh, yeah.
or mostly. I remember
Oh,
that, and
yeah.
you were so open and so ready. I mean, we did theater productions. And you were a person and a
Oh,
nurse. So
yeah,
it was
you were
like,
good.
and it wasn't like any of these conversations were hard to talk about, but I remember when I wanted to shave, one of my friends at school said that she started shaving, but I was so embarrassed because like any bodily functions, some of the things that I've been through, as you know, but they have affected my ability to look at sexuality or the body or anything or normal things, a period or anything, and without being completely ashamed and awkward. Like I'm the only one who's ever had to shave her legs or had a black hair growing under her chin at the age of 40 or had a period that,
Oh,
so
no.
I took that shaver and I remember I was so afraid, because I didn't think I would get in trouble, but I was afraid. I was so embarrassed. So I went into the barn and I tried to shave my legs dry. I had no idea how to do it.
Oh,
And then it was
you
all
poor
wet and
baby.
splotchy. And so I came in and I was crying
Oh,
and I
man.
was like, you're like, where did you get this razor? And I said, I took it from Erin. And she goes, well, honey, I'm not mad at you. Not as angry as your legs are. Like, and I remember you taught me how to
Yeah,
shave.
your legs.
And you taught me how
Oh,
to shave.
good. Oh, I'm
You
so
let me watch
glad.
you. You let me watch you apply makeup and
Yeah.
different like washing, like you showed me different hygiene things. And those are some things that are so overlooked. The structure is
Yeah.
important. The only things that I took with me into my parenthood were the things not to do. That was my training. And the things that the very rare adult in my life would emulate that I should do. You did give me structure, to your point. I could have used more. I had over 30 homes and I had
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
that provided structure. One, yours with love, and one, my foster parents in Casa Grande, who both were cops. Definitely there was structure. So those building blocks were crucial.
And what I just always wanted to ask you, maybe it's a good thing because this is really healing my soul because as parents, and you'll have this too. I guarantee you'll think of everything you ever did wrong.
Already there.
And God, I know. And I just wanted to ask you where you ever got the courage to get through all that to a point where you're a wonderful mother now. You're really going to take that and fight for other children. And you're able to look at that without rage, because I get rage just thinking about some of the things you went through. So how did you get to the rage? That's the word. I was going to say angry, but it's bigger than that,
It
what you
was.
had to go through.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
how did I get through it? Well, not in my childhood, not in my early adolescence. I fought a lot. I mean, I clung to the foster kid survivor in me far longer than I even needed to survive. It's very hard to let go of survival mode and just live life. And then there's the denial aspect that, my rage is rational, that my rage is rational. Everybody else, deserves my reactions, my, abuse, because the world is crap and it crapped on me and I'm going to crap on it. And it was uninspiring for sure. It was scary for my family, to watch me go through all of those real trials. I mean, there are things about my 20s, early 20s, 18 on, aging out of foster care. I had absolutely no direction. Ended up back on the same mountain, surrounded by the Hells Angels and tweakers and just a bunch of people on a desolate desert road. And then, of course, met the cutest guy on the mountain and entered my first domestic abuse relationship and was pregnant by the time of 18 or 19. So how I got through it was I can say that I do still have that anger and side only. And it's not rage anymore, though. It's an anger for this injustice. It is this problem that I see. It takes compassion. It takes understanding and maybe listening to what's going on. There are so many good foster parents out there, but I experienced a lot of abusive ones. The fact that those reports are so casual, and I have looked them up later. Casual, very casual. One of my foster families in Coolidge, their son was a registered pedophile, and whenever CPS came or caseworkers would come, he would go hide in the doghouse of the Rottweiler's doghouse. Nobody was going into that dog yard. Nobody's going to get past the doghouse. And I would tell them every time, he is a sexual offender. He is assaulting one of my foster sisters, who they adopted out of foster care. They were very violent with me. I pushed the lady because she grabbed me by the hair, which is something that used to happen to me. Abusively, and I freaked out and I pushed her over the couch of her cluttered living room and threw her couch over her. And I was very small, but there's that rage. There's that nuns throwing a bus off a baby kind of rage. And I ran and I hid behind a Sonic and called the police because I was afraid that they were going to come after me.
Good for
and
you.
the police, they did nothing. They did do something actually. They put me in juvie for 6 weeks because they couldn't find another home, and I refused. They tried to put me back in that same home. I refused to go back in. I made some threats on myself. I did everything I could to not go back to that home. So of course now they have to up my meds because now I'm suicidal, depressed, and erratic. But really what I'm doing is getting the hell out of that place because nobody will do it for me and nobody has been listening. And these are the kind of things that enrage me still. They anger me because they haven't stopped. It isn't over. And, 400,000 children going missing out of foster care. Where are the reports? Where are the milk cartons? These are the things that still anger me. These are the things that really, the lack of justice, the looking at every child like, you don't need to be heard. You need to listen. And then what do we teach them? We don't teach them to have the confidence to change the world, to speak, or to even live their own lives effectively or successfully in doing that. And so that does anger me still. Why I am through it now is because after years of denial, after dealing with this, feeling so alone, feeling like, and again, to your point of growing up without the internet, we didn't have social media. I didn't have groups. I didn't know there were other foster kids. I knew that there were some in the homes I lived in, but I thought we were such a small faction. And I had no idea how many of us there were because we were all hiding. We didn't want anybody to know that. We all had the same.
Well, you feel like you're the only one. That's what you feel like because you think everybody else out there has a perfect life and a perfect family. That's what children think of. They think there must be something wrong with me. There's another thing that I've found that happens when you've been through what you've been through. And I wonder if you could expound on if this happens to you. What happens is this: when a child has been abused like that, they don't care about pleasing adults. A lot of children, they do everything to please adults. Well, because you were pleased when you get around them and show them, because you had this thing with a lot of kids. My husband was, his mother died when he was 8 and was put into orphanage, grew up in orphanages and then put in juvie and went through all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I noticed with him was it was get you before you get me, because I know darn well no one's going to be there for me. So I will start a fight or I will attack you, will tell before you actually throw me out. And foster kids get thrown out so much that they're going to get you before you because they cannot trust that they can be loved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that point, absolutely. And there's another reason behind it too. When you get kicked out so much and when you already have the weight of the world, your siblings, your parents, abuse, and all of the guilt and the shame, and you know that it's inevitable. Also, you have this idea that a relationship with your mother will work this time. So you're fighting to get out. You're fighting. You think that the only thing in your way of your relationship with your parent isn't your parent, but the people, the system. And one of the reasons that I would do it is, I know this now. Before it was, more BPD. I'm gonna get myself kicked out before you can kick me out. And that was the
Yeah.
general reason. But I'll tell you, looking back at it, I believe that I wanted a good, valid, I had already been labeled so many times. I just didn't want more reasons. I would get kicked out for my labels and I would do it on purpose because if I gave them a reason, then at least I was in control. And that
You
was
were in
more.
control. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it did. And another thing to that is it played into my adult life. I mean, with jobs, with impermanency,
Yeah.
with friends, I would delete somebody
It
if
would
they
have
said what.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a very hard habit to break. And then of course, we're also not the kind of people wired to do things. My type of, or my category of foster kids, because there are so many different ones, but people like me are not wired to go out and then serve the system even more. It might seem irrational, but even working into the system that is the economy, even just doing things for people because they're requiring it of us or because we have to, because we don't have direction. It was taken from us. We don't have purpose. That was taken from us. We don't have our own identities because we have so many. We have no idea. We weren't able to sit and twiddle our thumbs like a lot of kids were able to do and go to school and focus on our events and our activities and get mad at mom for being a little bit late with our pom-poms at cheer practice. We had to figure out what our passions were, what we were going to be good at after the indoctrination as adults. And if we could get to the point of sitting and being able to think clearly, independently, and that's a difficult thing. It does carry into adulthood.
And that healing process, it's a slow process, but it
Very.
has a lot to do with saying I am enough just the way I am. And who I am is exactly wonderful because everything that I've done in my life has given me what I got right now to face anything.
Absolutely.
Jim, my husband, has said the same thing as you did about, look at that family. Gee, that's a big problem. Couldn't go to football practice,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was starving, he would talk about,
Yeah.
I was homeless.
hmm
I lived under a bridge in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Gee, mommy didn't buy me a car, So
Yeah.
it's a whole nother way of thinking. But with Jim, with all he has been through and orphanages and all the different things, and also PTSD from his childhood, when they put him into Vietnam, that was nothing for him. I mean, well, it was,
Wow.
but he learned a lot of skills of survival. And I just find that what I see in him and in you is this great compassion and this great understanding. You can't read a book about this and understand what it feels like and what
Yeah.
people need when they're going through a kind of thing where they're abandoned, when they're alone. And one of the things that you do and what Jim does and for him was being an orphan, it was, I am going to do it. I am going to learn this skill. No one else is there for me. So I am going to get strong. I am going to solve problems. He's a great
Right.
problem solver because
Yeah.
he's not used to asking someone to help him. And so
Yeah.
he's had to do it on his own and you've had to do it on your own. And so those two things make me love him. I'd marry him again if I hadn't already,
Oh.
because he has such compassion for others when they're going through. If I go through a hard time, he's right there. But also he can solve problems and figure it out and do things. And he doesn't sit and wait for someone else to fix it for him. Very
Right.
independent. And that's what you are because you've had to be.
And one of the pluses, one of the downfalls to that plus, though, is such strong independence can
The
really,
downfalls to the
um,
plus.
yeah, I'll tell you, it really, It can change how we view other people though. I mean, it's independence, but it's also like stay out of my problems. I can handle this myself. I don't like we don't like small talk. We don't
Yeah,
like
that
when I have a problem, I don't want to be met with a solution. I'm just venting a problem. You couldn't possibly be in my head or understand the full dexterity of what it is. So just say, yeah, that
yeah.
does suck and move on. I just don't like the vulnerability also of asking people for help or being open. I think that's a big transition I'm going through now. This podcast is almost that entirely. It's a platform to talk about my vulnerabilities and let other people do the same. And we're asking for help. We're asking for help as a foster nation, as foster kids, and as foster care alum. And that's what this is. And I think that tells me that I've hit a growth, spurt mentally because it was very hard. I mean, my
Yeah.
chest still tremors when when I was setting this up, just knowing what we were going to talk about, my chest was tremoring. I was,
I had a hard time too. When you asked me to do this, I had a hard time too because you are compassionate and you do feel you've been through all this, and I went through it with my own kids and with you. It's interesting to me. One of the things that came up when you were just saying that is, do you have problems with being a team player? Because you're used to doing it on, Jim does. He can do it himself,
yeah.
letting others help. Or for me, I've had a big problem asking for help and not being able to do it myself because I had to. I was a single mom. I had to get through everything, and I didn't have someone to grieve with. I just felt that was a weakness. And now I'm starting to realize that having feelings is not a weakness. Asking for help when you're having a hard time, reaching out, that's a real issue for a lot of foster kids. Well, for me too, for people that have had to be on their own.
Um, as far as the team player question on every resume or every application for any job I've taken, that was a lie. I'm not. I have I say I am. I get the job, but then you don't keep the job when you lie on your resume, and learn that out too, because they're actually looking for a specific personality type, and they want to hire based on that. But team player, I am not. I get very overwhelmed, very claustrophobic just in the presence of people. But as far as like bringing other people in or beyond the scope of amazing interviews and, the keynote speaking and going to different conferences. But then there's the handshaking, and then that's the stuff I really recoil from. The still working on the intimacy of human connection and things like that. So team player, I can be on a team of all very independently working mechanisms who are good at their job and working toward the same goal, but I don't want to be bothered by them while I'm working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, it does. Yeah. Being independent is great, but learning how to ask for help and allow someone to be there for you is a big challenge for some of us.
I
So
agree
that's the good news
completely.
that you can, yeah, that's a strength. Maybe that's what we're about looking at right now. Maybe it's important to look at the strengths that we've found in surviving difficult times, and also where we need to say, okay, these are some of my weaknesses that you don't have to be ashamed of, but it's okay to have them. And like what we're doing right now, this is wonderful because it's okay to talk about it. Because you know how many people will hear this podcast and go, oh, it's not just me.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, she
That's
felt
oh,
that way
wow.
too?
That is a big reason I did this.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
isolated. I was lonely.
yeah.
I felt like the only one in the world, and I'm not the only one that feels like, or that felt like that. And if one thing could happen with this podcast, it would be to take that stigma out of the word foster so that when somebody says I was in foster care, they instead say, I'm foster kid fierce. What do you want to know? Cause I got a story about everything, cause I've lived a bunch of different lives before I even aged out of foster care. I had lived many different extraordinary lives, so many different cultures, so many different religions, so many different ups and downs. And, it's like, I want that to be an empowering statement. I am foster kid fierce. I was a foster kid. Look at me now. And I really want this podcast to help with that messaging, because right now the message is, oh God, you were a foster kid. Oh God, are you okay? And I'm like, are you? Like, are you okay? I mean, my life got me
Uh,
here.
yeah. I think that's a really important message, and that's a really good focus for your shows. This is important to show that this is what I went through, and this is who I am now, and this is how I got through it, and ask others how they got through it, and to come together to allow yourself to be healed by others' response, because that's a very healing thing for all of us.
Yeah. And I will say you kind of did something like that with your own recovery process by writing Voices of the ER. And I want to get to that
Yeah.
very important part.
I tell you what, if you're an ER nurse, you just can't make up these stories. You see a part of life that you just can't even imagine. So I just take a journal of some of these stories, but also the courage and the amazing faith and inspiration of people going through crisis. It's amazing. I guess we're at our best when we're at our worst. So writing some of these people's stories, it was such a way of them talking to the world about what an amazing, what a privilege it was to be part of this critical times in their lives. But I'm also an intuitive, and I would see, and I was there at the veil of crossing and death when someone died and crossed over, or someone was born and came in. And so I
Wow.
could see other entities there welcoming them and or counseling them, saying it's going to be okay. I could hear their voices, and children do that naturally. They don't unlearn that we have guides, we have angels, we have people that come in from the other side to help us cross over. And when you are in a critical situation like life and death, there you are never alone. And so I got to talk about what I see at the moment of death, who comes and guides people, and birth, and who hands that baby over for beginning of life, but also
Yeah.
some incredible things that people do for each other. So I tried to just, you just don't put the happy stuff. You don't just put the sad stuff. I tried to put it all together. I could have kept just the fun stuff, because there are some interesting, funny stories. But I thought life is not like that. So I wanted to have that spirit of life and of inspiration, but also a good sense of humor and survival, and
Yeah.
just that path that we take. And I think it's in the book, and I think it felt good to write it. It was very healing to write it.
Yeah. It was healing to read it. But as far as the,
Oh,
the
thank you.
humor goes, I'll tell you, there was a part in there, a story that I recognized from my childhood, that happened to you at ER. And we just happened to be sitting down at dinner. And you had made your famous spaghetti and decided at that very moment to tell us, first
Oh
bite of
no,
food,
what
first
did
bite of
I
food,
do?
decided to tell us about a very large man who, I want to hear it like I heard it at dinner.
Oh my God. Oh, you just, like I said, you can't make this stuff up. But my kids, if you're a nurse's or a doctor's kid, you're going to hear stuff that you get kind of used to. But, it was Halloween, and I'm never going to
Of
go to
course.
Halloween, ER nurse. But, I had to transport this patient because he was very obese, and they had done surgery on him. And, they opened him up, and they found that there were veins wrapped around this tumor and stuff, and they needed more extensive surgeons. So they're going to transfer him from that hospital to this other hospital that they were set up to take care of his finish his surgery safely. So they just wrapped him up and put a binder on him, and they didn't sew him up. So I'm an ER nurse. They said, can you transport with him? So we get him in the gurney, and he's like 300 pounds. So we wrapped him all up in all anyway. And so we're going in there. the ambulance, and it was like a 4-minute ETA to the next hospital. So we're ready and we're going and the sirens are going and everything. And then I hear, the EMS guy go, "Oh shit, he's going through the red light." And he went, and all of a sudden there was this quiet where then there was a screech, and then the whole ambulance turned over and this big man fell on top of me. And then his wounds started opening. And that's not. And so I'm underneath this big man and trapped. I know it's not funny, but
it is, but it isn't.
I'm underneath him. I'm trying to get under, and I'm trying to get all of his guts, I guess, to back over his open wound. And now I'm in there and you can't get out anyway. And I hear all this, and when it's one of your own, all the cops and everybody came, they're trying to drill to get into me, and I'm trying to hold his whole belly that had opened up on top of me. I told you that at the dinner table?
Yes, you did.
God.
We're having, I remember we had all just sat down. I remember Aaron being really excited about that story. Yeah.
I apologize ahead of time for telling you that story.
Hey, I love it.
Oh dear.
It's my kind of dinner story, I'll tell you what. Kathleen, I'm so excited that you were here today. I just love hearing your voice. There's so much joy in it. There's so much inspiration in it. We do have to conclude our interview right now, but is there any advice that you wish you had known as a first-time foster parent? Any extra advice? Anything you want to leave us with?
I just think pray. Just pray through it and realize that there are a lot of, the foster program has a lot of help for you. And I just thought I could handle it. And so it was very hard for me to ask for help. So ask for help is what I would say, because I was also very independent, so I would say, don't be afraid to reach out, because there's a lot, and we've gotten a lot better in the work I'm doing now with Child Protective Services and with all the first responders. We've gotten a lot more understanding. We got a lot more ways of helping without judgment. So that would be my advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's there.
And that goes for foster kids too. Ask for help. Know that we are all out here. There's so many of us out here. So for all of my foster siblings out there, I just really want to encourage you. You can do it through this podcast, but let's stop living the lie that we are alone and that we're the only ones. I am going to tell you about one of every 10 people that I meet has come out of foster care or has come out of some sort of situation where they were displaced or removed from their parents. We are not a stigma. We're not even a minority. And as sad as that sounds, it should also be encouraging that you have a voice, and without your voice, again, you're leaving the others behind. I really want to thank Kathleen Kelly today. This has been amazing. You guys, do not forget to get her book on Amazon. It has, like I said in my previous podcast, it is both digital and a hard copy and paperback. It's called Voices of the ER. I'm going to have the link to it in this podcast description, as well as our email, iwafosterkid@gmail.com. That'll be in the podcast description there. So please reach out to me. Get to know great people like Kathleen Kelly. Get to know their stories. Leave a comment after you read her book. That really helps get the book out there, and share it. I know it's going to affect you the way I did. And it does have great humor in there, as well as some stories you won't want to miss. Thank you to everybody. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been wonderful for me too.
Gonna say goodbye now. I hope we can get you back on here.
I would love to. I just find this is my passion also. So it's wonderful to see how I'm passing the torch to my darling Amy. You're doing a wonderful job.
I love that. And you really did. You taught me the entertainment value of it too. I definitely became an entertainer based on my wonderful and talented aunt. But everybody out there, this is the end of our podcast episode for today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please share this. Reach out to me again with your stories. That's really what I'm in it for, to get this message out there. And your story will empower the overall message. We need it. We're lost without it. And until next episode, stay foster kid fierce.